Welcome to Unlocking Moves, where we want to cover those key pivotal moments and decision points that really change the lives of successful entrepreneurs and leaders. And I want to hear stories, not just their glory stories. I want to hear their gory stories. This week, we have a special episode because we're going to do another montage episode of greatest hits. This one around gory stories. As I said, we learned so much from the mishaps and the mistakes and the challenges that we have along the way. So that's what I hope to do today is have you see other people's challenges all in one spot so it inspires you, especially as you're facing difficulties in your own career or your own journey. So we're going to start with one of my favorite episodes. This one, I call it the Poppy episode. It's Allison and Stephen Ellsworth. And, you know, most people see the success of a company like Poppy now where they're doing, I'll just say, a lot of business. They're all over the place. I see their trucks all around Austin now. And they think it's just a magical ride, which honestly, it partially is. However, what they don't see is the years and years of challenges that went into the making of today's success stories. So I'd like to share a clip from our episode where we talked about some of those challenges that they faced along their journey.
Like, we probably would have gone out of business if we hadn't gotten a deal on Shark Tank. And like, they see the success and the bright and shiny of Poppy now, but I mean, we were in the trenches. I mean, to the point where we'd quit our jobs, like the AC in the truck breaks, you can't afford to fix it. You know, like he's working a second job to pay our rent. Like we got to the point where we're like, okay, we're doing this, or like we have to give up our dream. So walking into it, it was a lot of, we need this to change our lives.
That's why I was sweating so bad.
Well, let's stick on that because I do say the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson.
Yes.
You guys are a shining example, but there's no limit to the shining examples of people who were on the floor, you know, living out of their car, whatever, and end up being an amazing story. Mm-hmm. But most of the population don't see that part. They just see the Poppy on the shelves and that you guys are doing amazing now. Mm-hmm. Can you talk me through a couple of those days where you truly are air conditioners broke in the middle of July in Dallas, Texas with a 9-month pregnant? Tell me some of that.
Yeah, I think we always say in 6 months we quit our job, we bought a house, we got pregnant, and we started the business. Right, so we were
not very smart.
No, but it paid off. No, it paid off.
We had saved up some money, and there was a little bit more context behind that. But I think, you know, as you talk about being in the trenches, one of the most vibrant images that's been burned in my brain is I come from cold climates, so Texas summers are challenging for me. So I'd go early days, start at the farmer's market, set up. It's already like 95 degrees out there, just completely sweating, right? Then I'd get in my truck with no AC, and I would drive to a Whole Foods with an extra change of clothes because I was so hot. And I would change in the parking lot and park all the way in the back because I was so embarrassed of like people seeing me in my truck. And I'd walk up, I'd do that at 2 Whole Food stores, and then I'd go back and shut down the farmer's market. So literally from sun up to sundown, I'm just like constantly sweating in this truck.
You're forgetting a step. The wife over here, we also had our own manufacturing facility with equipment that had no AC that you're bottling in all week. So there was extra steps of no heat or pure heat, and honestly hell at the end of the day. But I like love that. I think like going through that gave us like a really intimate understanding of like how our product is made. Like we've done every single job at Poppy. And so when it comes down to it and we go out to these big fancy things, I'm still like on the floor, like breaking cases open and building the displays. And you see like the young kids behind you, like playing on their phones. And you're just like, come on. I'm like, we still have it. You know what I mean? It like drives me.
That grit.
I love it. More entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs need to hear that, need to hear the stories of knowing how the process works and being able to, before you outsource, know how it works yourself, and the grit and the mental fortitude and the physical fortitude, everything it takes to be successful. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. What I like about that is a few things. Number one, I like the fact that Allison understands the way their product is made intimately. So she can really appreciate what their employees go through today, but she can also step in, and it makes her very grateful for where they are now as an organization. But I really believe that people need to understand how some of those challenges that a company goes through in order to achieve that success. It's not all just rainbows and sunshine. If you think it is, you're not going to make it very long as an entrepreneur. because more often than not, you're dealing with grit, you're facing adversity and the challenges that come with it. Sure, things may look great now, but most people don't understand the blood, sweat, and tears that went in to making that a successful company. So talk about challenges along the way. One of my guests who had quite a few along the way was Brian Moran. For starters, he was fired twice by the same guy. Now, I think it was 2 different times he was employed by this person. And second of all, he went through bankruptcy. He was remiss to talk about it at first, but then he started talking about it, and I think he's now proud to share with folks that he's been through that very challenging situation. Let's see what Brian Moran had to say about some of those challenges along the way.
Be grateful. Gratitude. I have 3-word mantras that I love to carry around with me. And the one I'll share with listeners today is that gratitude changes everything. You know, you chose the roller coaster of business, right? There are going to be highs, there are going to be lows. Be grateful you're on the ride, you know, and enjoy the, going up and coming down, and make the most of it. It's when you're grateful, when you live in the present moment and you are enjoying today and you're grateful for it, you're not focused on the past. Everything that happened in the past has led you to where you are today. And if you're happy, be grateful for all of the people who fired you, who let you go, who got you to where you are today. Because change one thing in the past, you change everything that you have today. So are you happy? If you are, be thankful. And then as far as going forward, you know there are going to be bumps in the road, and there are going to be dead ends, and there are going to be stressful moments. Enjoy it, accept it, and learn from it. And if you can do that, you'll worry less, you'll stress less, and you'll be in a better position to take advantage of the opportunities that come along.
Man, Brian, that is deep, and I really appreciate that counsel. You're so right. And if we have that attitude, for gratitude, it makes us a better person. But what I really like about what you said is you are where you are for a reason. You are where you are. The experiences, the warts, the wounds, the celebrations, everything that came before is what sets you up for the next phase of your life, your career. I love that. I love the concept of having an attitude for gratitude. I also love the idea that the challenges, the warts, the mistakes, all those things along the way, they're what make you who you are. I wouldn't change any of them, even though they were very uncomfortable at the time and maybe embarrassing or whatever. But those are the things that I've learned along the way, and they make me who I am. So the question is, what do you do from here? How do you leverage those lessons learned along the way to make yourself a better person, a better father, better husband, better whatever, and make you the person you were meant to be? So talk about learning from the challenges along the way and your entire journey to get here. My next guest I want to talk about is Kit Rich. She is a fitness guru to the stars, but a few years ago, she realized she had a lifelong dream to be a producer. So let's talk a little bit about her, I'll say, new awareness about her dream.
Without knowing it, I've only realized it until recently. I think my purpose in life is to help people, but with my voice, through me as me. I've been doing it in fitness for as long as I can remember. I started to pick up on the fact that I was transcending just, working out when I created a YouTube page and I started to see the comments and the messages that I was getting from people. They were not talking about the changes in their body. I mean, yes, of course that came every once in a while, but what they were really talking to me about was how I was actually shifting their perspectives about themselves and their lives, and then how that was helping them in other arenas. That is the thing that I hung on to more than anything. I think that has also been my through line with writing. So I think my own personal journey and what drives me is that I want to help people and heal people with my voice, whatever that means, whether it be through words, whether it is through speech, whether it's through fitness videos. I'll never give up fitness. I love it so much. And I love it so much because I love the people that I train, I think, and the people that I help. I once received an email from someone from the Middle East telling me, I won't get too into details to respect her privacy, but telling me how I helped her leave an abusive relationship. that doing workouts with me on the regular gave her the self-confidence, and through my words, hearing them regularly, she got the guts to do what was right for her. I think years of giving that messaging ultimately ended up coming back to me. I was giving it to people, but not necessarily living it myself. And so I think what ended up happening was I'm 41 now. So at 39, when I realized that I was telling people to live up to their potential, to follow their hearts and follow their dreams, and knowing deep down that I wasn't doing it myself, that was the driver for me to do the movie.
Dude, that is so powerful. First of all, you serve people through the power of your words. And then the fact that you neglected your own self in the process is so normal. And I love that you found your voice for yourself and you're serving yourself. As you can tell from that segment, I was really fascinated with the concept that her purpose in life is to help people through her voice. And frankly, she was giving it to others, but not living it herself. That's something that's so common amongst servant leaders like Kit. And I love that she talked about it. And I hope that it inspired you. I love that she was able to shift other people's perspective, but she was neglecting herself. Not that I love that. I love that she admitted it and that she uncovered it. And now she is back to living her purpose. It's interesting that while she was helping them shift their perspective, she was neglecting her own self, which honestly, I see that a lot with people who are inspirers. And they're on stage making everyone else feel loved and feel heard and listened to or whatever. And oftentimes they neglect themselves. So I'm glad that Kit was able to recognize that, been able to shift her own perspective, and now she's following her dream. Great job, Kit. I hope and I know that you're inspiring many others along your journey. So speaking of discovering who you truly are, my next guest is Ramon Ray. And he had a epiphany, if you will, helped out by a client who told him that he wasn't quite a good fit for the audience that he was speaking to. And instead of cowering in shame, he leaned deeper into who he was and who he is. And it's really made a big impact on his life and his career.
Something, Kurt, that happened more recently to me, I don't know the date, but it's within the last few months, few years, that it's honed in on as me being comfortable being Ramon and or realizing who I am. That, I think, was one thing I'm realizing, Kurt, that has happened to me in recent days, is that Seth Godin, he's kind of like my mentor. I like him, a friend of mine, but I can't be him. I do look at Steve Harvey and Kevin Hart. I want to be the Steve Harvey, Kevin Hart of small business. I admire them. Look what they're doing. Tyler Perry. What I'm trying to get to is that the unlocking moves is, let me hone in on what I do well. Nope. Not a math aficionado. Nope. I'm not the scaling guru, even though, I can wear hats, many hats, Lauren Feldman, 21 hats. But honing into Ramon Ray as an edutainer in one slice of what I do, big slice, and rocking that for all it is. If you want, hey, everybody, my name is Brene Brown. I will teach you to unlock your mind. Not me. You want a comedian? Not me. But I'm feeling comfortable owning and being Ramon Ray. That make any sense, Kurt?
It does make sense. I want to ask you why or how did that come about? I want to come back to the other point in a second too. But go ahead and what was the key awareness where you got this knowledge?
A few things I think combined, and I don't know if I've talked about this quite like this before, so it may not come out all perfect as I want it. But a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, Alfred Edmond Jr. He's Senior Vice President of Black Enterprise, Alfred Edmond Jr. We're in a similar space. He's a bit older than me. He told me that point blank. He said, Ramon, we were sitting one day. He said, Ramon, don't forget why companies are hiring you. And I knew it, but it just unlocked it when he said it that direct. Ramon, they're not hiring a speaker. When they hire you, they see something in you. Doesn't mean, Kurt, there's no room for Kurt. Doesn't mean that. It just means on that day, that time, they saw something in Ramon. So that's one. Number two, I was at an event once and I got some pushback. Hey, Ramon, how you're presenting yourself, not quite a fit with the audience. They said it in a good way, wasn't a critique. I didn't take it that way. It was said in love. But I realized I'm just not the right fit for them. That's okay. Let me call anybody else. So when I find the right audience who wants the full fire of Ramon, speaking too fast, humor and all when going to the audience, that's my sweet spot. So
let's go, man.
Those things help me.
I love it. Being yourself is so key to all this, whether it's you're on a stage or whether you're doing life in any other way. Being yourself is where it's at. And so you uncovered the gift is just to be yourself.
Yes.
And not everybody's going to like that Ramon, but that's okay. I love it. The things I love about that are Ramon's quote, "I want to be the best version of who I am." That is amazing advice for everybody out there. Be the best version of who you are. I love that he leaned into honing what he does well and make that part of who he is, part of his persona. And then lastly, just the basic understanding of realizing who he is. If we can all do that, we're going to bring all of our gifts to the table and we're going to be absolutely the best version of ourselves. We're going to be very, very productive and we're going to be much happier. I can promise you that. So we just talked about being yourself, being your best version of yourself. My next guest was Lakita Clear. She's a former Hollywood actress, been in several movies and commercials. Now she is a public speaking coach. She helps people with their own voice. But along the way, she learned a few lessons. First of all, she learned how to stop comparing herself to others and to simply be herself. She also had a major faux pas during an audition that, shall we say, just didn't go very well. Here we go with Lakita Clear.
I think most of the stories in Hollywood are trying. I think that from the outside looking in, people see Hollywood as like, wow, people are famous, they're doing movies, but that's like a small percentage. So most of the time is me getting an audition, going to sit in a room filled with people, of course, pre-pandemic, where you're sitting there and all you're doing is sizing yourself up against everybody else. So imagine is if you are pitching someone constantly or trying to sell something and nobody ever buys from you. So out of every 100 auditions, you may get 0. So I remember even this is really laughable, but I remember a period of time where a friend and I would sit on the phone for hours trying to figure out what we could do to make it in Hollywood. And at some point we had this bright idea that it was because of how our hair was. Something so simple, we thought, oh, well, our hair's curly. Maybe the hair should be straight. That's it. If our hair was straight, we would be making it big in Hollywood. So we would constantly change ourselves and try to figure out what we could do. And now that I think back on how much time I wasted, 3-4 hours we would spend. And then we would go on IMDb, which is the big site that you find everybody on. And we would just type people in and try to see like, well, what does she have that I don't have? What does this person have that I don't have? And I did this probably several times a week for many, many years in my career. So that's kind of a funny one. And then another one was, I remember I got a big audition in Robert De Niro. It was the Robert De Niro movie. And I don't get starstruck at all, except Robert De Niro. You folks know what I'm talking about. De Niro is De Niro. So I'm so excited. I'm ready to go in this audition. I go in the room and I just choked, just thinking of De Niro and like, oh, this is his movie. And I remember just being frozen, the feeling of doing all that preparation and standing there and not even being able to get the words out of my mouth. So that was another unfortunate miss because things may have gone differently had I got that De Niro movie.
Wow. Lakita, thank you for sharing. There's 3 things I want to come back to from what you just said. Number 1 is comparing yourself to others and the trap that can become for actresses, for little boys and girls, for people across the globe. Everybody has some level of comparing themselves to others, and it's a death trap. Number 2 is I know that a lot of who you are today is based on and built on your authenticity. So the fact that you spent so much time trying to be someone you weren't is mind blowing. And I'm so glad that you are who you are now. And I'm sure that was part of your journey. And the third thing is around De Niro and locking up and talking about that and how defeating and deflating, I'm sure it was for you at the time, but now you're able to tell the story. And again, I'm sure you learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I think it's when I think back to the observations that you just said, the biggest one for me is this idea of comparison, because I think it's in every single part of society. There is no one exempt from it. I don't care how big you get. I don't care what industry you are in. And it's really dangerous. It's really the feeling that you have when you see other people on social media and you are wondering even why someone has more likes on a post than you have. And it was really a detrimental thing that I continued to do over and over. And when I stopped doing that, for me, that was a big turning point. I had it was like such a weight lifted off of my shoulder when I stopped comparing myself to other people.
Wow. Such a weight was lifted off of her shoulders when she stopped comparing herself to others. We've probably all heard that comparison is the thief of joy. And I love how Lakita says comparison is dangerous. Once she embraced who she was and leaned into who she was and found her voice, man, that's the secret to success. Let's go. Thank you, Lakita. I also want to talk about the De Niro piece, because how many of us have failed? We have a big moment and we simply fall on our face. We trip, we make a mistake, we whatever. Those mistakes are often what make us who we are. And so while it was devastating to her at the time, she overcame it, and it made her a much stronger person, a much stronger woman, a much stronger actress, and frankly, a much stronger coach. Now she can look someone in the eye and say, look, I've failed before too, and here's a specific example. You ever heard of Robert De Niro? So Lakita, thank you for sharing with us your stories about comparing yourself to others, and also your story about failure. Because as I like to say, the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson. So I hope it's clear by now that we all make mistakes. The question is, are we going to learn from them? So speaking of mistakes, one of the mistakes that all of us make, we've all made hiring mistakes. So I've got a special one back from one of our very first guests was Mike Smerklo, who is an author and he's a venture capitalist. He's also a very successful entrepreneur. He had a tweet several years ago that I brought up during our episode. And the tweet goes something like this: tips I wish I'd learned in business school. Don't hire coke addicts. You're going to make mistakes, and get help. Y'all, I could not pass up the opportunity to dig into the quote, don't hire coke addicts. So let's hear what Mike Smerklo had to say about hiring.
I need to go hire the air quote great salesperson. So I went and did a bunch of exhaustive interviews. I met a guy who had a really robust career in sales. He had great references. He had taken a couple years off. He'd moved to San Diego. He was, in semi-retirement, again, air quotes. He just seemed like the guy that we needed to fit, but we didn't know what they were doing, so we hired him. Fast forward to the story. First couple weeks in, he tended to show up on Monday kind of tired. Looked like he had maybe had a lot of fun over the weekend. Drank a lot of coffee. One time he had some nail, like a razor cut on his thumb. We're like, oh, this isn't kind of weird. And then finally, after only a couple weeks in, I was on vacation, my first vacation. My business partner called me and said, Fred, I'll call him Fred, hasn't come into work. And he's missed really big meetings. So it turns out Sam / Fred was a raging coke addict. In his retirement, he had developed a small problem with cocaine and really was not a functioning cocaine user, if there is such a thing. So we had to fire him. So really good lesson. One, it's really hard to hire people. It's hard to hire head of sales, but if you can, avoiding coke addicts is a pretty good first step. So it was one of my real kick in the whatevers moments as an entrepreneur, and kind of showed me oh shit, hopefully I can say that on this podcast. We're in it. I'm running the show. I screwed up. I've got no one to blame. I got to go tell my board. This guy introduced to the company, introduced to the board, introduced to customers is a coke addict. Not exactly a glowing way to start an early entrepreneurial career.
So I believe that Mike's lesson resonates with all of us. We've all made hiring mistakes. The question is, what was the learning along the way? Well, A, I guess don't hire coke addicts. B is maybe he should have hired better. There you go. On that note, we're going to wrap this puppy up. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Unlocking Moves. We'll call it the shit show episode, or perhaps the gory story episode. Please go like and subscribe Unlocking Moves wherever you consume your podcasts, on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, you name it. Let's go. If you're an entrepreneur and you think you might have outgrown a member of your team, or maybe you've got a mic, as we talked about in Who's Your Mic, check out this quiz at who'syourmic.com/quiz. That's who'syourmic.com/quiz.